all across America and around the world. This is Veterans Radio. This is Veterans Radio. And now, your host for today's program, Dale Throneberry.
Hey, welcome to Veterans Radio. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are listening to this program. Thank you very much for tuning in. I think we've got a really good program for you today. Obviously, we're going to be talking about women in the military. There's been a little bit of controversy going on in the recent couple of months about this. And so we thought that we would get the woman's side of this issue. So we've got 3 women veterans on the program today, which I'll introduce in a little bit. But we're asking you, if you happen to be a woman veteran or you have a comment about how you feel about women in the military, please give us a call here at WHAM, 734-822-1600. 734-822-1600. Unfortunately, obviously, if you're listening to this as a pre-recorded program, you won't be able to get the call in. So anyway, so we'll get right to that in just a second. But I wanted again to welcome everybody to Veterans Radio. There are 2 events that I want to mention today. One is that the 22 Vets a Day, back up, Dale. Okay, 22 Vets a Day are placing crosses out at the Washtenaw County Vietnam Veterans Memorial at the intersection out there on Huron River Drive. And they're looking for volunteers to help them put in the 22 crosses a day. They put them in every day at 10 o'clock, and they're going to be doing this up until Veterans Day. So if you are driving along and outside there in Ypsilanti Township going down Huron River Drive, and you see a bunch of people out there with some crosses in the ground, they could really use your help in putting them in on a daily basis. So that's that word. The other thing is that there is a concert coming up here, and here it is. It's going to be on, it's coming from Celine. The Celine New Horizon Band is presenting the Joe Labuda Memorial Veterans Day Concert on Sunday, October 26th at 3 p.m. And it's going to be held at the Celine Middle School. That sounds pretty cool. I all love military music and so forth. So let me repeat that real quick. It's the Celine New Horizons Band, and it's going to be a Veterans Day concert at Celine Middle School on Sunday, October 26th at 3 p.m. And if you have, any announcements that you want me to make or us to make here on Veterans Radio, let me know, and we'll get those out, not just for our local audience, but for our audiences in Detroit, California, Maine, and across the country. So, just let us know. Send me an email, dale@veteransradio.org, and I'll get that out for you. Before we get into talking with our guests today, I got to thank our sponsors. We can't do this program without our sponsors. So let me get into that. That's Legal Help for Veterans. Legal Help for Veterans specializes in veterans' disability claims. Call Legal Help for Veterans at 800-693-4800 or go to their website, legalhelpforveterans.com. The National Veterans Business Development Council, better known as NVBDC, is the nation's leading third-party authority for certification of veteran-owned businesses. For more information, go to their website, nvbdc.org, or give them a call at 888-237-8433. PuroClean, known as the paramedics of property damage, each PuroClean office is independently owned and operated. In fact, PuroClean is one of the nation's leading restoration franchise programs. And just for veterans, you get a 25% off the franchise fee. It's pretty cool. For more information, go to puroclean.com. And I also want to make sure we thank the Irwin Press Corps and American Post 46 and the Charles S. Kettles Vietnam Veterans of America, Chapter 310, both of Ann Arbor, Michigan. If you'd like to support Veterans Radio, please go to our website, veteransradio.org, and click on the donate button. Thank you in advance. Okay, here we go. So, one of my guests today, Kate Melcher, sent me forwarded or shared an email. I'm not really sure of all the terminology that goes on out there, but she sent me this copy of a post that one of our other guests, Misty Dugan Martin, had sent out regarding the highest male standard and so forth that's going on out there. So I wanted to get a hold of this woman, and luckily I was able to. So first of all, let me introduce her. And this is Misty Dugan Martin. She is a retired Army Lieutenant Colonel, I think. And she's also, she was spent 21 years in the military. And she has started up her own business called M3 Defense Counseling, which we'll get to in just a moment. So, Misty, I want to welcome you to Veterans Radio.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Well, and also because of this, I wanted to get some other ideas here, kind of spread across the age groups of veterans in our local area. So I did ask Kate Melcher to join us. Kate is I have to put that on. She is right now. She is the executive director of Fisher House, Michigan. But she was also an Apache longbow pilot in her former lifetime, and is very active in the local veterans community. So Kate, welcome back to Veterans Radio.
Thanks so much. It's always great to be on the program.
And joining us is Lydia Pinkham, and Lydia is a Coast Guard veteran, and she was a search and rescue petty officer second class. And she's also, I have to, make this disclaimer here that both Kate and Lydia are on the board for Veterans Radio America. So anyway, Lydia, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having us, Dale.
Okay. So Misty, let's start with you. What, we all know that there are a lot of things going on out there in the political world and the military world right now. What motivated you to write this particular essay?
I think it was just hearing a lot of the negativity, and to see us having to fight some of the same fights that, we did, and I thought that we were past 10, 15, 20 years ago, being able to get credit for what we were doing, because women have been serving for decades, and and even before that. So I think that was the biggest thing, was just the frustration of hearing that those rights to serve in combat and get the credit for serving in combat for women was what was frustrating me, and kind of what led to me posting that.
Well, one of the lines the one that really got me was the idea that you don't have to be a muscle man to do so many of the tasks that we're doing today in today's military. And as you pointed out in there, is that I'm trying to find the line here. Now I can't find it, of course. Okay, so here it is. Decades of training data and operational experience show that women consistently excel in endurance, fine motor control, stress management, and decision-making under fatigue. When the training and opportunity are equal, women prove again and again that effectiveness in combat has nothing to do with gender and everything to do with discipline, composure, and grit. That line, I thought, encapsulated everything that is going on out there, I think. I think there's a lot of misinformation that's being spread regarding what women are capable of doing in the military. I have talked with Tammy Duckworth, who was also a helicopter pilot. People may be familiar with her. She's a senator from the state of Illinois. She shot down, lost both legs as a result of her combat experience. And she echoes what you are saying. So I'm trying to figure out how do you feel about what's going on out there? And I'm going to ask Lydia and Kate to jump in if you'd like to, because this is going to affects your generation especially, but I think it's going to affect recruiting as we can go into the future.
Dale, one of the things that I always appreciated about the Army is that it was truly a place for men and women to compete on a level playing field. I served in a more technical MOS. I was a helicopter pilot, and there are not different standards for men and women in flying helicopters. You either meet the standards of safety of flight or you don't. Does not matter what your gender is. I when I was in a line company, I never saw other women. I was the only one. And, that was unique and new. And, it took a little bit of adjustment. But at the end of the day, it's about safety of flight. It's about making mission. And there are not different standards for men and women. I think the carefully selected words that we've been hearing from the Secretary of Defense have been selected with a certain agenda in mind, and not focusing on the fact of female service members having served honorably for a century. It's only been since 2013 and 2016 that women were, allowed to be in combat, quote unquote, or allowed to serve in combat arms, MOSs. But there have been women on the battlefield throughout American history. What has changed is not our ability to participate, but our ability to be recognized for it. Until 2013 and certainly until 2016, you could have a male and female soldier side by side at a checkpoint when a VBED goes off. And the decorations that those two soldiers would receive would be different simply because of gender. One would have either taken action or received wounds because of combat. The other wouldn't. So in my mind, it's never been a question about the ability of women. It's been about the military actually recognizing the contribution of these women.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think, many times awards happen to be who happens to be there when whatever it is occurs. And I know it's not just women. When you go back and you look at the history of military honors, medals, and so forth, that there's a certain amount of discrimination that has occurred, not only with women, but also with other minorities, which is kind of sad when you think about it, because we're all fighting for the same cause. And it's just really annoying. It's really annoying when you think about, not the philosophy of the whole thing, but just the physicality of it. I know, Misty, I'm going to come back to you. You talked about some of the physiological advantages that some women have when it comes to being in the military.
Yeah, I think I was a counterintelligence agent for the first decade of my career, and I think there are a lot of things that we've learned. Let's say with the Tiger teams and with bringing women in to serve with our special teams, because they were able to gather intel that would not have been able to have been gathered from a man, because the women in foreign countries did not speak with the men, but they were sitting there and listening to everything going on, because on where they were considered important, but they're sitting there and they're hearing everything. So once we start incorporating our female service members into those groups, they were able to gather that intel that these women heard. And I think there are some things that just like there's some things that you can do just as well, no matter what your gender is. Some people are born leaders. I really believe that. I think there are some people that have a knack for leading, and it's not a male female. There's great leaders in both, and I think that leadership can happen, no matter what your gender is. And being a pilot, being an astronaut, there's certain things that women's bodies do better than men, and but it's we're not saying that men can't be pilots because of that. So I think that and to what Kate said, I served in combat. I did 3 tours, and saw combat and stuff, and but when it came time to be awarded combat action badges and stuff, I wasn't in combat because I wasn't in combat arms and stuff. So those things are frustrating. And I think it's also looking at what we're talking about now. It is going to, harm our recruiting and what we want our young women to see and to do. And I think anybody that is willing to lay down their life for their country deserves respect and deserves to be, supported in anything they want to do, in any branch they want to do, as long as they can, do that skill. And I believe wholeheartedly that, some men, some women are better at, at shooting, at better at, rocking, at better at, you go with what your skills are and what your heart leads you to do. And, that's what it takes. Is it takes the mental strength, the endurance and things, but I don't think it's gender specified. And I really don't think we should take away women's rights to serve in combat. And what a lot of people don't see is that also, when you take away women's rights to serve in combat and stuff, it also, and in the combat arms, it hurts us as far as promotions. If you look at your 4-star and your 5-star during, combat times and stuff like that, they come from combat arms most of the time, or they come from because they saw, or they led certain units. And if we take away women's rights to serve in some of those high profile things, then, we're also keeping them from, to making certain ranks and things as well.
Can you just, for our audience sake, can you give me a little background on what you did while you were in the service?
So I served 21 years in the active Army, and I was, like I said, I was in counterintelligence. So I was the intelligence officer for Combat Engineer Group, Triple Nickel. I did, different training exercises and stuff. I deployed with a special ops unit in 2006. And again, in 2007, I did 2 tours in Iraq, and then became an acquisition officer and ran the programs for Stryker, which is like a wheeled tank, more or less. Ran that program and deployed to Afghanistan to support our Stryker unit over there. And then ran the GLTV program and retired at the end of 2016.
Okay, and now you run your own firm, right?
Yes.
The M3.
Yeah, so I run M3 Defense Consulting. This is our 9th, going on our 10th year now. So I, when I retired, I wasn't done giving back to the community. I retired because it was the best thing at the time for my family. I had two boys that were getting ready to start. One was being scouted for college hockey, and the other getting ready to start high school. And I was a single parent. But I wanted to continue to help the community and help the warfighter. And so I decided to start a consulting company that helps companies get contracts with the government, helps the government. I've done a couple of things for the government and stuff. And that way I'm allowed to continue to give back, but a little more on my own terms. I get to be my own boss for a change.
Yes, not having somebody tell you what to do.
Yeah.
I like that.
So, Dale, I
yes.
want to interject for just a minute since you were talking about your sons, Misty. I understand one of your sons recently enlisted. Is that right?
So actually during COVID, he enlisted as an 11 Bravo infantryman, and then he served, and then he went back to college, and he's the 2nd lieutenant in the Army.
Excellent. So what are you telling your young son as a junior officer about what's being said in the ether about women serving in the military?
So my future daughter-in-law is a cadet and in the National Guard here. So I get to his fiance, and so I talked to both of them quite a bit about why it's important for these branches, for everything to be open for everybody. And I think the biggest thing that I try to instill in him is, besides leadership, is that, not to assume anything from anyone based on, gender or looks or any of that, but to guide and to support everybody and see what, more or less what they're made of. And I think that to keep an open mind, that's my biggest concern is, people that have not experienced what some of us have experienced. And there's fewer and fewer of them in the military, because a lot of them are retiring now. And so I think that guidance is being lost. Those of us that served and, went up through the ranks, not being allowed to be a combat, into combat skills, and then finally getting that opportunity. So I just try to share that. And both my boys, they're military brats. So, and they were, while I was stationed I was with USASOC, Special Operations Command and stuff. So they got to be a part of that family, and they know how close the military can be. And So they're both very pro, women in the military and pro women's rights and stuff. But I think it's just talking through things with them and hearing their side, because I think that's one of the biggest things that young people are frustrated with, and where we lose some of our people is feeling like they're not being heard. And so talking to them and understanding their point of view, but trying to explain why things are important and what the effects are, because like I said, people don't assimilate the not being able to serve in a combat arms with not being able to make rank, unless you really understand the nitty-gritty of the military and stuff. And so explaining those things and explaining how would you feel if something that you wanted all your life you weren't allowed to do, or you were told you couldn't do because of your gender. And I think that's some of the guidance I keep telling them. And I tell my future daughter-in-law, just shoot for the stars. Don't take no for an answer. There's no reason you can't. And with them both being there, they're in that, hey, we really can't say anything political or anything. And so that was another reason that I tried to be more vocal and why I made that post, is because now I am allowed to have a voice, and I try very hard to use that, but to use it and to educate and not spread hate.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more on that. Lydia, I wanted to ask you, since you're kind of the youngest of the group here, that what caused you to enlist in the first place?
Honestly, Dale, I talked to a recruiter after being a swimmer my entire life. I was, I think, fresh out of high school or last year of high school. I can't remember when. And this guy came up to me at a swim meet and he said, "Have you ever thought about joining the Coast Guard?" And I went, "What's the Coast Guard again?" But it was presented to me as an opportunity to help people getting the same benefits that a lot of people, that everyone else in the military got, but that it was domestic. It was protecting the United States and serving and helping people, instead of presented in this lens of going overseas and being part of a war, or um, more like serving people instead of being part of a conflict, is the way that it's framed. But I was very drawn in by the benefits, specifically education benefits. But I also needed some direction at the time. I didn't really know what I was doing with school, and it was a good opportunity for me. But when I went in, I was talking to a recruiter. I was working on a contract, an employment contract that still had 6 months left, but the recruiter was trying to get me to go immediately because they needed women. They had a quota that they were trying to meet to recruit women that year. And at the time that I went in, the Coast Guard was only about 10% female. And he was saying, "Could you go next week? You could leave for boot camp next week." And I panicked and said, "Give me a couple months." So, I mean, I originally went in for the benefits, and I loved being on the water. I loved swimming, and I just really wanted to help people. And I think when I got out, it was a little bit higher by the time I get out. I think about 14%. But I served at a couple different units that had very low percentages of women. So on a ship based out in the Pacific Ocean, a crew of about 180, and I want to say there were maybe only 25 women on board. And then my unit in Florida, I was at a search and rescue and law enforcement unit, and we had a couple women at the station, but for a long time I was the only woman on the tactical operating team. So I've kind of gotten used to being one of the only women at a unit, and I have a lot of feelings about the things that are going on now, what we're hearing, the messages that are being sent down to the people in the military now and to the general public, and trying to organize all these thoughts to contribute to this conversation is really hard, because I feel a lot of things. But we talked in the very beginning of this conversation about things like a physical fitness test and women being able to meet the highest standard that men are held to. And we went through a lot at my Florida unit trying to suggest and submit recommendations for a universal fitness test that depended on the type of unit you were at. So our fitness test when I was down there in Florida was like a run or a swim, push-ups, your sit and reach, and your sit-ups or crunches. And we just did not feel like those were adequate representations of how capable we were at doing our jobs. And, instead of push-ups, a better way to evaluate whether someone was good at my job was to throw a giant sack of potatoes in the water and make them heave it out a couple times in a row, because that's what we were doing. We're pulling bodies out of the water, and you can have a certain type of strength. Maybe you're great at pull-ups, but really terrible at pulling a human being out of the water. So we were trying to come up with some way to evaluate physical fitness in a way that was actually applicable to the job that you're doing. And there's no difference there with men or women. If you can do the job that you're supposed to be doing, you should be allowed to do the job. So, I have a lot of feelings about the PT test, mostly because I am not built for pull-ups, but I can pull someone out of the water pretty well. So yeah, I have feelings about this, highest standard, when it should depend on the job. If you can do the job, then that should be good enough.
I think so. I agree. And so how do those educational benefits pay off?
Pretty well. I have a couple degrees all paid for by the government in some way or another. And I work as an academic advisor now for engineering doctorate students. And I have a lot of veteran students, and I still get to assist them, kind of help them through, not just the GI Bill, but their VA benefits, basically everything that they might have access to as a veteran student, just kind of passing along the experience that I had going through school. So, the benefits worked out great.
Well, I know. I mean, that's an important part. I mean, even 50 years ago, when I got out of the service, my benefits paid for undergrad and a master's degree. So that's part of the thing that I'm concerned about is if we start eliminating women from many of these MOSs and so forth, then that they're going to miss out on those opportunities that you and Kate, I know you use yours, and Misty, I'm sure you used yours along the way. That's what I'm concerned about. And you also mentioned the idea of these PT requirements. And I guess, Misty, I'm going to ask you this, is it the same for all of the different parts of the military, or is it the one where you've got to do X, the 350 point thing?
So in the Army, I mean, we've changed a million times. So I was told that they just switched again, I think last year or something. So I think they still haven't figured it out yet, right? So they're still not even sure what the accurate gauge is across the board. And, I don't know if they ever will. There's so many different jobs so my branch of the Army, so I really can't talk to any of the other ones, but there's so many different jobs in there. And so what the right physical test is, like Lydia was saying about, what she had to do. I mean, when I was deployed, one of the times, I was on for 20 hours and off for 4. And I did that for 6 months. At the time, it didn't bother me at all. It just is how, my body was and stuff. And I was able to still think on my feet and still, run 2 shifts. And so that had nothing to do with whether I could, and I've always been, just because I've always been great at push-ups. I could knock out 60 in 60 seconds when I was, in, and it's just one of those things. But I'm 5 feet tall, so I'm not a good runner. I mean, so I have to double time pretty much just to keep up with people. But I could ruck, with a 60-pound ruck, 60-pound ruck on for, 2 days straight, and it doesn't, bother me at all. So, they've done it by, by age, and they've had it to where, the youngest age group is the hardest. And then for a while they went to, the second oldest is the hardest because, by then you've, tuned your body a little bit. And so when they'll get it right, I don't know what's right. I don't know that either. I mean, it's just one of those things that they keep trying. And, like I said, with all the different jobs in the military and stuff, I don't think there is one PT test that across the board is fitting.
So, Dale, I will mention that there's some administrative standards, and that's a little bit what Misty was speaking to, right? And those are going to be gauged based on age, gauged on gender in some cases, that everybody has to meet. That's the minimum standard. That doesn't have anything to do with your job. You can max out a PT test, as a female, and maybe not even make it through rope, which is like the introduction to the Ranger School. There are different tests that come with the more demanding jobs. Either those tests are physical or they're mental. And I don't know, the bottom line for me, and I think what is so frustrating is that the recent comments, I think, only serve to weaken the force, right? The United States military is and has been the greatest fighting force that the world has ever seen. And, there was a time when there were questions about whether units should be racially integrated, and the military is better because it is. There was a time when, there was a real worry about including women in uniform at all, and the military is better because we have integrated women. Every time you open the aperture and include more people who can compete for the best jobs, you have the better opportunity of getting the best of the best and maintaining the greatest fighting force the world has ever seen.
Well, I agree with that. I think what's so frustrating, and I'm trying not to look at this strictly from a male perspective, which is why I have you three on here to add your thoughts to this. Is when I was in the service, granted, that was in the Revolutionary War, but it's the women were not allowed. That, I guess that's the term. They were not allowed in any of the combat fields at all, and it just seemed wrong. Kate and I have talked about helicopter flying and the deft touch, the feel that you have when you finally figure out how in the hell to hover something, and it doesn't make any difference whether you're male or female when in that particular task. I think when the idea of if you're moving up in the combat arms, yeah, you have to have a different test, because everybody, well, not everybody, but most everybody can make it through basic training. And then if you get, go for a special unit, and they require more strength, or they require more running, or require whatever it might be, then that test may change. My concern is that they're trying to turn the military into this big macho organization that I don't know. It's beyond me that they're trying to eliminate whatever the percentage of women are that are in this service right now that have been doing a great job. I mean, if they haven't been doing a great job, they wouldn't have been able to advance.
Dale, there's about 20% of uniformed service members that are females at this point. Mm-hmm. So it's a significant portion of the fighting force across all MOSs, across all branches.
That should say something. I mean, we can't go back. That's the whole thing. You can't go back. You got to keep moving forward. We do have a call on the line right now, and I don't know. I hope it's an educational benefits call. If it's a regular benefits call, we might have to cut it a little bit short. But we've got come on the line. I forgot. I erased your name already. Hello.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be on track. I'm very supportive of educational benefits. I just was going to raise it from the penny wise, pound foolish angle. America is made stronger with educated people. And if a person goes through the service, gets the training through the service, and then once they're out, they're allowed to get not only civilian training, but advanced training if need be. It's an investment for America. It makes America stronger when we have clever people with new inventions and interaction and all sorts of things. As a matter of fact, I don't know if either of, or all of your guests, the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. It opens up and it says that the empire fell because of paranoia, that they had created so many enemies that they had to be looking out in every direction at all times, and they could never relax, and they could never fix the sewer system or the potholes. And so just the idea of people getting a little education to make sure we don't forget that or repeat that in history.
Well, I agree with you, Tom. I want to thank you very much for giving us a call. The idea of the education is really important. And for those of us who went through the military, there were always opportunities for us to expand our education, even while we were on active duty. And I'd like to bring Misty on this. I know that up at I hate to say real life officer, up in the captain and that, all above that, they always had to continue going, getting more education, didn't they?
Yeah, you were expected to continue your education, both military education. They were very big on sending the officers to military schools and such. And then to make a certain, promotion point, you had to have, your bachelor's, of course, to get in, and then your master's to continue to progress.
Yeah, and we're going to take a kind of a short break here. And when we come back, I want to talk about some of the reduction that we're reading about, where so many of these senior officers are retiring or being ripped out of there. So hold on. We're talking today on Veterans Radio about women in the military, and we're just kind of having a discussion on it. We don't, we're trying to figure out what the ultimate goal is of what the current administration is doing. So we're going to take a quick break. Every week here on Veterans Radio, we highlight a Medal of Honor recipient. There's only been one female Medal of Honor recipient. And so I'm going to read the citation for her. It says, whereas it appears from official reports that Dr. Mary E. Walker, a graduate of medicine, has rendered valuable service to the government, and her efforts have been earnest and untiring in a variety of ways, and that she was assigned to duty and served as an assistant surgeon in charge of female prisoners at Louisville, Kentucky, upon the recommendation of Major Generals Tecumseh Sherman and Thomas, and faithfully served as a contract surgeon in the service of the United States, and has devoted herself with much patriotic zeal to the sick and wounded soldiers, both in the field and the hospitals, to the detriment of her own health, and has also endured hardships as a prisoner of war, 4 months in a southern prison while acting as a surgeon. And whereas by reason of her not being a commissioned officer in the military service, a brevet or honorary rank cannot, under existing laws, be conferred upon her. And whereas in the opinion of the President, an honorable recognition of her services and sufferings should be made, it is ordered that a testimonial thereof shall be hereby made and given to the said Dr. Mary E. Walker, and that the usual Medal of Honor for meritorious service will be given her under my hand in the city of Washington, D.C. on the 11th day of November, A.D. 1865, Andrew Johnson. We're going to play a couple of PSAs here, and then we'll be right back continuing our talk about women in the military.
If you have a VA claim denied by the Board of Veterans' Appeals, contact Legal Help for Veterans at 1-800-693-4800. They're experts in handling cases before the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims. Their number again, 1-800-693-4800.
Military veterans touch everyone's life. I'm guessing right now you're thinking of a veteran, a close friend, relative. Maybe it's you. Even the toughest of us sometimes need help, but don't know where to turn for support. You don't need special training to help a veteran in your life. We can all help someone going through a difficult time. Learn how you can be there for veterans. Visit veteranscrisisline.net. veteranscrisisline.net. A message from the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs.
Every warrior needs support. I did. After my time in the military, I struggled with mental health and some substance abuse.
That's when James called the Veteran Navigator Program and was matched with me. Our navigators help any veteran who served in the military, Coast Guard, or National Guard, regardless of discharge status or how long they've served. James and I talked on the phone and set up face-to-face meetings. He shared his story and struggles. And because all navigators are veterans or family members of veterans, I could relate. From the first call, James knew I was there for him anytime. We helped connect him to the mental health and substance abuse care he needed.
I'm proud to be a United States veteran.
And I'm proud to serve veterans like James and their families with compassion and care. Get connected to a veteran navigator at michigan.gov/walkingwithwarriors.
A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
We're back here on Veterans Radio, and we're talking with our three women veteran guests today. We've got Misty Dugan Martin. She's a United States Army Lieutenant Colonel, retired, and then she's the founder of M3 Defense Consulting. We've got Kate Melcher. She retired as a captain from the United States Army, helicopter pilot. And we've got what else have we got? Lydia Pinkham, it's a Coast Guard veteran and a board member for Veterans Radio America. And we're just trying to figure out what is going on under Secretary of War excess speech to all of those generals. I was uncomfortable for them. I don't know what that was all about. I'm trying to figure out why they are not encouraging women to continue joining the military. And it's Misty, as you pointed out, without combat experience, you can't get to that next level. We have a good friend here in Ann Arbor who was a colonel, and she got passed over for a general. She wasn't able to get her star because she had no combat experience. And I think I've heard that story many, many times. And then what was going on in the news was that they were releasing many of the leaders of various branches of the service and women and admirals and generals and so forth. And I'm just wondering what's going on. What is your opinion? This is what we're doing today. What is your opinion of what is going on?
I think this is the first time we've really seen the administration lean one way or the other. I think in the past, they've always tried very hard to be apolitical once in office. I'm not saying that you couldn't tell who was, what, but they've tried very hard to be apolitical and to bring the country together. And unfortunately, my opinion, that's not happening right now. I don't think they're as concerned about bringing everybody together. I mean, some of the words that were actually said was, it's, if you don't agree with me, there's the door, more or less. And, if you don't like it, there's the door. And I think that's it's not the right approach to take, no matter what, because my concern is that if the people that want true equality and want to, put the right people in the right jobs and stuff, if they continue to leave and retire and such, then who's going to take that stand? Who's going to say no when they're told to do things that are, not what we swore an oath to? And that's my biggest fear is, everybody that would take a stand getting out, and then all you have is a bunch of yes people remaining. And to look at people that have, those people that were there had served at least 20 years, and most of them more close to 30 years, and to look at them and to tell them that from somebody that did not serve in those type of, for that longevity, and for somebody that never served and actually avoided serving, to say, that they were tired of, people that, were fat or were out of shape or that couldn't meet standards. I was mad for them. I was, I I was furious for them to be talked to like that, and for and for the people that have served to, I mean, some of the people that have just been released for no cause whatsoever, that have been relieved of duty, people that have served honorably, and just because they don't meet the standard that, these 2 or 3 people want them to meet, and what they think a service member looks like. That's my biggest fear, and biggest gripe with everything that's going on is, they have this image of, what the right person looks like that should be serving. And it's, that's not what our military, like, Kate said earlier, that's not what our military is. And nor has it been, and it's better because it's not.
I obviously think similarly to Misty. I would say 2 things. Number one, every officer in that room not only swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, but also the laws thereof. So, the Hatch Act, there are actual laws on the books that prohibit political behavior and political speech in uniform. So I'm certain there's a good amount of discomfort just from that. The other piece is actually something that the caller sparked, and that's at the risk of sounding ham-handed, because I think that's what the whole Secretary of War speech was, ham-handed. I had a mentor officer tell me that an enlisted person's job is to do, an officer's job is to think. And every one of those men and women that had multiple stars on their shoulders or on their chest, many of them came through the academies. They were selected among the best of the best in their high schools so that they could go to the best colleges that we offer in the U.S. and have spent, 20, 30 plus years in uniform. And like Misty talked before, there's an expectation that you continue your education, not just formally when you go to Army War College, but the Chief of Staff of the Army publishes a professional reading list every year. And the expectation is that you read what's on that list. And it's everything from, Sun Tzu and von Clausewitz and, the classic books on military tactics and leadership, up through, asymmetric warfare or essays by the Brookings Institute. These are thinking men and women who understand nuance, who understand the modern theaters of war, and the simple having the Secretary of War suggest that it's as simple as maxing out a PT test completely misses the point of what our professional military leaders have been spending their lives devoted to.
Well put. Well put. It's hard for us here to, as Misty pointed out, I think a lot of veterans in the veteran community were upset by that whole meeting, without going into any great details about what it was. But it just seemed like they brought in every general from across the country at great expense across the world, and kind of tried to belittle them. And I don't know, I was always taught, I was always taught to respect my superior officers. And right now I'm feeling a little bad about that statement, because those men in that room, men and women in that room, they really couldn't stand up and say, what is going on here? Because we serve, because of the way our military is set up, we serve at the behest of a civilian leader. And, we don't normally question that, but I think we have to start thinking about what is happening here. And this is, we're running out of time already. And I just going to get maybe one last comment from each of you about where is this going? Lydia, I'm going to start with you, because you're the really smart one here, I know.
Oh, I don't think the superlative is a great use in this case. Dale, I'm really glad that you mentioned the expense of it, because at the end of the day, whether or not you believe women should be serving in combat roles or any of the things that we've talked about here today, they held a meeting that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to fly members of the military, these generals all over, to come to this place and hear them talk. It's really hard to sit back and watch some of the fiscal aspects of this happening the last few months. Coming from a branch that was constantly told do more with less, and kind of seeing behind the scenes sometimes how that money is spent. When I saw pictures of that meeting, my first thought was, holy crap, they flew everybody there. They had per diems, they were on orders. Like, this must have cost so much money, and they could have watched a video. So I'm glad you mentioned the expense part. I think in general, one of the best lessons that I took with me when I left the service was that you never know who's going to bring what to the table. And if we are trying to have a less diversified military force, we're getting rid of a lot of people that could really help in any situation. And I'm obviously biased, but I think women bring a lot of great skill sets to the table. Logistics and operations. Women are actually, I work with engineers now in the aerospace engineering field, and women make excellent engineers, and they're constantly overlooked. So, I'm a big proponent of everybody brings something to the table, and the military right now is trying to get rid of people that could be changing our service for the better. And, I'll kind of leave it at that. I think that we are kind of shooting ourselves in the foot with what the future of our military could be by not keeping the best and brightest there. So,
agreed. I think this is a subject that we have to address more often, and I think it's something that we can do into the future. We've run out of time today, so I want to make sure that I thank Kate Melcher, Misty Dugan Martin, for being on the program, along with Lydia, to share your thoughts and opinions. I think it's so important, and we'll get back to you and do this again, because who knows what's happening next. All right. So we're going to be going out as usual on a God Bless America, but because it's women in the military today, I chose Mary Kay Messenger, and she is a retired Army Sergeant Major with the United States Military Academy's band. She spent, and her note was, she spent 29 years, 1 month, and 21 days in the military. And I love her version of God Bless America. And we're still so lucky and grateful that we have this country. Let's make sure we keep it. So until next week, this is Dale Throneberry for all of us here at Veterans Radio. You are dismissed.
God bless America, and that I love, stand beside her and guide her through the night with light from above.